What's up everyone, it's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and if you are a fan of Sega's back catalogue, any old school Sega IP that they may or may not have used any time in the last, I don't know, 20 years, I have potentially good news for you. So, Sega, or Sega Sammy Group, since they're a larger conglomerate kind of thingy now, but they've outlined in their 2017 financial briefing to investors and things like that about some major plans they have for the company and for the future of the company. So in what they're calling their road to 2020, which is basically everything they're going to do within the next 3 years, they've outlined some major stuff. The one particular point I want to talk about is that they specifically mention reviving old IPs. I know they've talked about this before, but the fact that they're bringing it up again is such an important topic because it leads to Sega's history, and Sega has such potential. We all know they're still making Sonic games. We all know they're making various games throughout their entire lifespan, still with the Sega name attached to it. Obviously, Sega own Atlas now, so we've seen the resounding success of Persona 5. Of course, there's other Atlas-based games. There's Shin Megami Tensei, the new one that's going to be coming out on Nintendo Switch. So I'm going to put up one of the slides from the presentation right here, and it basically covers the two main things I want to talk about. On the left hand side, you've got the digital game field. Create titles that will become global hits. That's self-explanatory. Establish digital marketing business. That's not too much to your average gamer. Expand overseas publishing business. Now that's good for the simple reason is here in Europe, for example, a lot of Sega games, or specifically a lot of Atlas games, are usually published by a third party. For example, Persona 5 published by Deep Silver instead of published by Sega. So Sega could essentially be coming to Europe in a bigger capacity. Not just Europe, but obviously I think they already have the US side of it covered, so that wouldn't be too much of an issue. But just in general, to broaden and expand their horizons around the world is always a good thing. So after their expansion of their overseas publishing business, they're looking to maintain profits through long-term operations of existing titles. So, to be honest, what that sounds like to me is it just sounds like, say, your mobile games, your free-to-play games, your games that will just, you buy once or you start playing for free and they just keep generating revenue. So, in-app purchases, kind of things like that. And develop next-generation titles. So, that pretty much is always a good thing. Now, one thing I will say is before we move on to the next side of it, let's look at the left hand side, okay? So they talk about all these games and all what they plan on doing, especially when it comes to expand overseas publishing business, maintain profits through long-term operation of existing titles, and possibly could also cover develop next generation titles. They have a picture of Phantasy Star Online 2. Okay, Phantasy Star Online 2, this game has been out in Japan and the Asian region for years, and Sega have always said, it's like, yeah, it's coming, it's going to be translated, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, and then they haven't said anything about it for like 4 years. So, yeah, that's, it is what it is. I know you can patch, you can get the fan patch and all that, but you have to create the Asian account, and it's just more effort than it should be. Because I know Phantasy Star Online, by the way, is a free-to-play game. So if that was to come out online over here, chances are I would probably play it. And when you look at the Phantasy Star series, all three of them essentially, you've got the main Phantasy Star series, you've got the Phantasy Star Online series, and in a sense, you've got the Phantasy Star Universe. Will we call it series? We'll call it series just for the sake of it. So they're all can be very profitable. They can all be great streams of revenue. Hopefully, we may potentially get a next generation version of that. We could have a PS4 version of Phantasy Star Online 2 here in Europe for all we know. So that's that part of it. Now I want to move on to the packaged game field. There's a couple of specific things I want to talk about, and the main purpose of this video is actually in this section. So, expand existing IPs and obtain new IPs for North American and European PC games. That's obviously a good thing, for the simple reason is it's expanding existing IPs. It's basically making more games in series we all know and love for North American and PC gamers. One thing in particular is when you look at, say, let's just use Persona 5 for example. the PC over the last few years has gotten an absolute huge wealth of JRPGs, and yeah, it's specifically JRPGs on the PC over the last few years. A lot of them from Sega, many also from Square Enix and Namco Bandai, but a lot of them from Sega. We've got, I know it's not exactly an RPG, but you've got games like Valkyria Chronicles. You've also got games like, what was the one they re-released recently? They have Vanquish, which is upcoming. There, it finally has a PC port, which promises to be the definitive version of the game. You've got Bayonetta, which recently received a PC port, and also definitive version of the game. So you get my point here. For PC stuff, not to mention games like Persona 5 could potentially come over, but just the actual wealth of their IPs, the Sega IPs, and everything they own in general, that could come over to the PC. There's so much potential in there as well. Build revenue base by being entrusted with outsourced development. So basically what would happen in that situation is maybe Nintendo decide to make a game, and maybe, okay, fair enough, they're going to keep Mario to themselves, but let's say they want to create something else. Maybe they want to create a new Metroid game because, well, Federation Farce is just a farce. But maybe they say, okay, let's do that. Let's go to Sega, and you know, Sega have made Panzer Dragoon. Sega have made all these games in this style. They've made Outrun. Okay, Outrun's not really relevant to it, but they've made Space Harrier. They've made that kind of thing. They're familiar with this kind of gameplay. Let's get Sega to develop our new Star Fox game. Or not, did I say Star Fox or Metroid? I got my wires crossed. Anyway, you get the point. It's developing games, Sega developing games from other companies, so they get it outsourced. Now, okay, challenge for new IPs. That's basically, we're not going to talk about too much in that aspect, because challenge of new IPs is just basically, what's the best way? Slightly change up your new IP. So instead of just reusing someone you already have, just come up for a new IP, or develop a new IP, buy a new IP, whatever it is. And here's the big one I want to talk about. This is the reason I'm making this video. Revival of major IPs. So we all know what Sega's history involves with major IPs. So let's look at let's take a quick list of some of the old IPs that Sega haven't used in, let's say, maybe the last 5 or 6 years, okay? Let's start kind of old school. You've got Golden Axe. You've got Streets of Rage. We all prefer to forget about Echo the Dolphin, but there's Echo the Dolphin. There's the Panzer Dragoon games. Actually, do they still own those at this point? Because there was the whole thing with Xbox. But anyway, you get my point. There's Knights. There's the big one that everyone is waiting for me to absolutely mention. And that is not Jet Set Radio, but it is Shenmue. So, revival of major IPs. It could be something as simple as the Shenmue HD Collection that we all know in our hearts we want, and that will make Sega a ridiculous amount of money, especially with Shenmue 3 on course to launch this year in December of 2017, hopefully barring any major delays. So, could this be what they're talking about? When you look at above what they want to talk about, expand existing IPs for the North American and European PC gamers with the revival of major IPs. Think about it. That's so much potential, and it could be what we want after all this time, which is the Save Shenmue HD, aka Shenmue HD Collection 1 and 2, which needs to release several months before Shenmue 3 releases. And the time is running out, because we need people to sit and play these games and get a proper experience with them, not rush through them, not be burnt out by them. Because if you're to sit and play, your average gamer is to sit and play Shenmue 1 and 2 back to back, they're going to get burnt out. Your average gamer. But people who know and understand and experience it, it's a whole different thing. And then they get a break. They finish Shenmue 1. They get a couple of weeks off. They play Shenmue 2. They get a couple of months off. And then, still fresh in their mind, they go into Shenmue 3. And it changes probably their lives. We hope. So we'll see how it goes. There's obviously effective utilization of development engines. We don't need to talk about the better optimized an engine is, the better a game runs. But you get my point. And obviously the better it looks on the comparative hardware. So is this what we all want in our hearts? Does this mean Shenmue HD Collection is coming sooner than later? E3 is a month away. It's the best time for them to announce it. And then just suddenly it launches 2 weeks later or 2 months later, whatever it is. So what do you think this means for the Shenmue HD Collection? Or just in general, what SEGA franchise would you like to see existing SEGA franchise revived? What SEGA franchise would you like a different take on a game? For example, you look at games like, let's just say House of the Dead, something that is typically an on-rails shooter. Would you like... Wait, they made House of the Dead. Yeah, that's true. So when you look at games like House of the Dead, typically an on-rails shooter, would you like a different version of the game? Maybe something that's not an on-rails shooter. You know, expansion of the IPs. Let me know in the comments section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter, details in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the rest of the videos in my channel.